Today on Mental Health News Radio, Kristen welcomes Mitzi Perdue to the show. Mitzi is a businesswoman, author, and master storyteller. Her talks contain practical tips for embedding a positive culture. Mitzi also recently started an organization called Win This Fight to fight child trafficking. Today they'll be discussing how real wealth is defined by how much you give and not by how much you receive, as well as how Mitzi created a new way to give more to try and prevent child trafficking. You won't want to miss this episode. Thanks for tuning in.
I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried. Will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Mitzi, thank you so much for coming on Mental Health News Radio.
What a complete joy to be with you.
Thank you. Now, you've been doing the podcast rounds, I heard, 60 some shows this year so far.
At this moment, you will be the 70th.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot of guesting. How are you finding it? Because I know it's so different. Each host has their own thing.
Well, actually, I absolutely love it because I have a message that I care about. And the most wonderful thing is it seems that people like to hear it because I keep getting invited back.
Well, you are delightful. I can say that. Just even in the emails that we had going back and forth, I just felt immediately, this is a really nice person. I'm excited to speak with her.
Okay, then I have to barge in and tell you my theory of life.
Please.
It takes one to know one. You just said that I'm nice. Well, that guarantees that you're nice.
Well, I love that. And do you mind if can you say the quote that you gave to me about success?
Yeah, it's a quote that I made up, so I'm quoting myself, but it does guide my life. Success is measured not by what you can get, but by what you can give.
It brings tears to my eyes again as you said it. That feels like my life.
Well, I figure, I'm an ambitious person and I'm constantly taking courses and trying to become a bigger and bigger person with the idea that the more successful I am, the bigger the platform I have. And that means for me, success is I want to be able to reach a large audience. And because the large audience, from my point of view, is I have ideas that I'm eager to share. And a large audience means that I can give more. And as for being on 70 podcasts as of today, I live for sharing the ideas that I hope will help people's lives in one way or another, get them closer to where they'd like to be in life.
What do you, I'm diving right in, but I've got so many questions for you. In terms of what Western society tells you and I don't mean just you, I mean the larger collective you, what success is, that can be very difficult, very challenging for people depending on where they're coming from, especially if they have mental health struggles. So a statement like what you just said, by what you give, takes away a lot of that idea that, oh, it's this mansion, or, oh, it's this thing, or, oh, it's if you have a lot of stuff. That your statement about how success is measured it can mean that, and then it doesn't have to mean that. That's why I love it. So where do you sit with
Okay, I will share
that?
with you, just very, very frankly. In my life, I've known a number of extremely wealthy people. I've also known a number of extremely miserable people, and the overlap between great wealth and misery happens to be much too close. To me, well, I'm going to quote a philosopher from 2,300 years ago. It's Plato. And Plato is saying this in Athens 2,300 years ago. He was telling his students about happiness. And he said, men think 3 things will make them happy that never do. And those 3 things are money, power, and fame. And he said the problem with those is they might give you a brief little burst of happiness, but long term, you always crave more. You know, the more fame you have, the more power you have, the more money you have. It's not satisfying. You just, it's a rat race where you want more and more and more. So his students asked him, if money, power, and fame do not make people happy long term, how about never? What does make people happy? And his answer, and I think this directly relates to your question, his answer isn't that you have stuff. No, his answer was truth, beauty, and goodness. And the reason truth, beauty, and goodness make men happy, and I guess he's saying mankind, or let's go with people. The reason truth, beauty, and goodness makes people happy is they're delightful in themselves, and you don't have to kill somebody for a bigger dose of it. They're satisfying in themselves. You don't have to always get more beauty. No, each beautiful sunset is satisfying and wonderful in itself. Each time you've done something good, I mean, it makes you feel great. So truth, beauty, and goodness. And allow me to switch from a philosopher from 2,300 years ago to my darling late husband. Here's a phrase that he used to use. He said, if you want to be happy, think what you can do for somebody else. You really want to be miserable, think what's owed to you. Is that not just one of the wisest things in the world?
That's so true. I have a feeling we're going to have to get a transcript for this show because I can't keep writing while you're talking because I want to pay attention. Yes, that is so true. And I have very wealthy, famous friends, and I have friends who want nothing to do with any of that. And what's the common theme there that I've seen is a really childlike wonder at the world that they just sort of care. That makes them infectious. And a friend of mine that's very famous said, I don't know how this happened to me. I'm not more talented there's so many people I meet that are so much more talented, beautiful, blah, 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 than I am. I can't give you, like, she's turned down every sort of come and speak on our stage about how you do what you do. She said, I don't want anything that puts me in a category of that I'm special above other people. And it took her a lot of years of soul searching to deal with the attention that she always got. And I think what finally helped her start rounding the corner was just her total awe and wonder and sort of childlike state about a lot of things, that she could sit and just stare at the sunset and go, this makes me happy. Does that make sense?
And I totally endorse that because, well, I'll tell you about the family that I grew up in, the Henderson family. And I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but my late father was the co-founder and president of the Sheraton hotel chain. At the time of his death, he employed 20,000 people. So guess what? Filthy, stinking rich, 400 hotels that the family owned.
Right.
So was he happy or not? I'm going to say his life was totally happy, because I remember coming in on him in his office in our home, and he was surrounded by all these books and papers and just hard at work. And I'm a little girl at this point, probably 10 years old. And Daddy, what are you doing? And he said that he was working on donations to different charities. And I asked him, why do you spend so much time on that? And he said, the greatest pleasure my wealth has ever given me is in giving it away.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
I love that. I love that. There's a couple, I wish I would have Googled their name, but I didn't know we'd be going in this direction. But their goal was to give away 90% of their fortune that they had made by the time that they were getting ready to move to the next stage of their life. And they succeeded, and they donated everything anonymously.
Frank Perdue used to do that. This is my late husband. And the happiest one of his donations, which, by its nature, it couldn't be completely anonymous, but he gave thousands of scholarships. And the happiest I ever saw him would be when, say, somebody who might be 30 years old, 35 years old, maybe they've started a family, and we could be in a restaurant in some city in America or even in Europe, and somebody would come up to him and say, that scholarship that you gave me, it's made all the difference in my life. I have a great career now and a nice family, and it wouldn't have happened without the scholarship. Well, Frank would just be happy for the rest of the day, knowing that he had made a difference.
That is how I feel too. On the other side of it, I have this friend who just I never cared if he could go sit and meditate in front of a tree and not eat ever, that he would be the happiest. Right. So truth,
beauty, and goodness. Plato was right.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, I'm a fisherman, and that's what I do. And I'm so happy. He teaches the way that he fishes is from a long line of fishermen, and he teaches that as well. And he hardly has anything in terms of what Western society would say is success. And yet he is probably the happiest person I've ever known in my life. I've never heard anyone laugh and have it be infectious like this guy.
Well, this spring, I wrote a book with Mark Victor Hansen, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy, and a total hero, by the way. I mean, that guy he's just so brilliant and kind and wonderful. Well, in this book, it's called How to Be Up in Down Times. And I told the story of Plato, but then I told a PS to the story, and I'd love to share it with you.
Yes, please.
It's a story of an emperor of France and a saint. The emperor of France was Napoleon Bonaparte. The saint was Mother Teresa. Now, Napoleon Bonaparte, back around the early 1800s, he had more wealth, power, money, fame, women, territory, all the earthly goodies that life has to offer in more abundance possibly than anybody before or since has ever had. I mean, just staggering amounts of wealth, money, power, fame. Mother Teresa, on the other hand, the charitable order, the Catholic order in which she was a nun, doesn't allow personal possessions, with the exception of she could personally own the 3 cotton saris that she wore, and that's the dress that a poor Bengali woman would wear, and the sandals on her feet. That was the beginning and the end of her personal possessions. And with her vow of poverty, she also, she would what's called eat the bread of the poor. If she was with say, a leper, she would eat the same food that the leper would. And so she was as far removed from Napoleon Bonaparte as anybody in the world could be, I think. Well, who was happier? I mean, is that not a good question? Did the person who had more power, money, and fame than possibly anybody else ever?
Absolutely.
Okay, here's the answer. And we don't have to guess, because both people wrote about their lives when they were getting towards the end of their lives. Napoleon Bonaparte wrote, and he's in exile in the South Atlantic somewhere, St. Helena, I think. And he's writing that when he looks back in his life, he can't count 6 happy days. Is that not amazing?
Ooh.
Okay, now let's jump over to looking at the life of Mother Teresa. Towards the end of her days, she wrote, "My life has been a feast of unending joy."
Amazing.
Is that not just the coolest thing in the world? The person with almost no possessions had a life that was a feast of unending joy.
Mm-hmm.
And Napoleon couldn't count 6 happy days.
It's an amazing story, and just the juxtaposition of those two people's lives. Mm.
Well, I came across it when just completely by accident. I love to read, and this happened. A biography of Napoleon was in my hands, and I read it. And then I came across a biography of Mother Teresa, and I read it. And I mean, you couldn't get a bigger contrast. One, Mother Teresa's entire life was about giving. Napoleon's entire life was about taking. And the givers of the world, like Mother Teresa, are happy. The takers of the world, like Napoleon, are miserable.
True. Very true. And finding how to be happy is for many, a lifelong quest.
Well, I'm 79, and oh my gosh, I'm going to say something so presumptuous, I ought to be locked up for it. But I kind of think I've found my happiness.
That's fantastic.
But it's in well, I'm working on a charity. It's called Win This Fight, and it's fighting human trafficking, which I think is the worst scourge in the world.
Absolutely.
And by the way, people with mental health issues, particularly, I don't know, teenagers, they are so vulnerable to traffickers. Because, imagine that you're feeling down and disoriented in one thing or another, and this person who seems kind of kindly says, come with me. I'll give you a good hot meal. I'll give you a place to stay. We're going to treat you right. And guess what? They don't.
They're entered in, and talk about someone who maybe didn't have, mental health struggles beforehand. Boy, are they going to after that experience.
Well, so prevention is, to my mind, the only answer. I mean, somehow, well, I'm not sure I have the answer, but once they've gone down, once a trafficker has gotten his fangs into them, boy, it's difficult to get out. Because are you aware, this is somewhat new for me, I learned it in the last couple of years, but a 12-year-old girl who's been abducted, very typically, she'll have to have sex with strangers 10 or 12 times a night.
Right.
And in the course of a year, it might be 3,000 men. And how you get back on your feet after that is mysterious to me, but I've met people who have put their lives back together, but it took years of therapy and
yes,
and help. But like my own son is dating a woman who was trafficked for 4 years.
Wow.
So it can be done. She got out of the life 20 years ago and became a very successful stand-up comic. And I'm just amazed that somebody could be abused so terribly for 4 years and still later in life, unless you knew her pretty well, you wouldn't even guess that she'd ever been trafficked.
Right. How did you get into this? I mean, I know, my journey of getting into dealing with a lot of early childhood trauma, sexual abuse. I was sexually abused by my father, and I started at 12 getting away from him. And then I've been talking about it ever since. But how did you come to this? What was the thing about this particular topic, trafficking, that spoke to you and made you want to champion against it and also for the people that have endured it?
Oh, my story began April 11th of 2019, because up until that time, I had heard the word human trafficking, but it didn't resonate with anything that I knew anything about. And so the words just kind of glided by. But then I heard a lecture. It was by a guy named Paul Hutchinson, and he showed videos of girls whom he and his organization, the Child Liberation Foundation, had personally rescued. But in these videos, I saw, little 11, 12-year-old girls, and I have to see the video again to know how many there were, but at a guess, like 20 of them.
Mm.
And they were all herded together for an orgy on an island. And I looked at their faces, and I'm a grandmother. I've got grandchildren which are the age of these little girls, and to see their faces, they were kind of frozen, immobile, with like terror and horror. And I'm thinking that this particular story has a happy ending because they were all rescued and put in situations where there would be families to look after them. Because the Child Liberation Foundation doesn't rescue children unless they know that there's a safe place for them to go and be restored to something as close to normalcy as you can get. But at the time the videos were being secretly recorded during this sting operation, and the little girls didn't know that they were going to be rescued, and I couldn't unsee it. The absolute horror. And so I began looking into what human trafficking was about, and sex trafficking with children. I mean, there are estimates from the United Nations that there are 1 million children being sex trafficked.
Yes.
And it hadn't crossed my mind that a child might have to have sex with strangers 10 or more times a night. And then only one child in 100 is rescued. The rest, their life expectancy is less than 7 years.
Yeah.
They will die from a drug overdose, or they'll die from suicide very frequently, or disease, or they'll be murdered and their organs harvested. And when I'm learning this, I'm thinking, this is the most evil thing that I've ever even imagined.
Yes.
And I thought, I want to do something about this. And well, I'll tell you what I've been doing about it. I felt, as I'm sitting in the audience, I wanted to write a great big check to help save more children.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, if I do that, that means cutting back on charities that I'm already committed to, like, for example, the food bank. And I'm thinking of the charities I'm associated with and who could I cut back on? And I didn't want to cut back on any because, some I've been involved with, maybe even being on their boards for like 10 years. And I didn't, I was stretched as far as I could.
Right.
So an idea came to me. I've inherited from my parents a desk that we believe belonged to a de Medici cardinal around the year 1600. And I thought, if I put this up for sale, two very good things would happen. It would raise money enough possibly to save 100 kids. And because it's a historical item and it belonged to somebody famous, there would be a lot of publicity around it, which would give more attention to human trafficking.
Yes.
Okay, so that seemed good. But then it occurred to me, I bet there are a lot of other people who have possessions that maybe they're in storage, maybe they're tired of them, maybe they need room for something else. Maybe the second wife hates the first wife's jewels, or who knows what. What if there were a giant auction that would raise $100 million that would be a way for people to convert physical property, tangible property, into cash? And a wonderful thing happened. First of all, there are huge numbers of people who were in the situation that I was in, who you'd like to write a great big check, but you're already committed as hard as and fully as you can be to other charities. But if there were an easy way to convert property into cash, they'd do it. And a huge number of super wealthy people have like works of art in storage. And if they'd be willing to part with it for the amount of good that they could do. Well, I went to one of the major auction houses. Actually, I went to two of them in New York, and both agreed that for the sake of attacking human trafficking, that they would forego their commissions.
Oh, wonderful.
I told PBS about it, and they liked it enough so that they have already filmed a half hour documentary on this. And the reason they were interested was because some of the gifts that have come in are just staggering, like one of the world's largest perfect emeralds, or a diamond and sapphire necklace that belonged to Marlene Dietrich that's appraised at $1 million.
Oh my goodness.
And the biggest one, by the way, I've been traveling around the world getting these donations. The biggest one was from a jeweler in Taiwan. And I've been giving talks in Taiwan, in Taipei in particular, and he knew what I was there for, and he invited me to have tea in his home. And we're having tea on the second floor of his house, and it's surrounded with just amazing Asian works of art. And he starts telling me, he said, Mitzi, this is a $150 billion a year industry, and it's the cartels that control it. And if you were able to raise $100 million, you could make a dent in their income.
Right.
They kill people. And he said, aren't you afraid of that? And I just blurted out. I said what was in my heart without thinking it. I said, I'm 78 years old. I believe in this cause. I don't care.
Mm.
Well, at that point, he got up. He walked around the chair where he was sitting having his tea. Up against the wall was like a curtain, and he pulled aside the curtain, and there was a safe. And I watched as he twisted dials of the safe, and then he reached in and he pulled out this red object, kind of round and a little smaller than a golf ball. And it's a perfect ruby. It belonged to a Qing dynasty emperor.
Wow.
It's probably 300 years old. And it weighs 70 carats. And since I'm going to guess that I'm probably the only one who's going to hear this, who knows what a 70 carat ruby looks like, but imagine you're holding in your hand a golf ball and something 10% smaller. I mean, it's not as big as a golf ball, but it's right up there. And just imagine what that's going to sell for.
Wow.
And then the other thing that I'm up to, and by the way, it was stories like that made PBS want to cover it.
Of course.
But because of COVID-19, that's all been put on hold because the auction house, and I'd mention the name of it, but they'd prefer that I don't, because since they're foregoing their 20% commission, they don't want all their other clients to know that this is getting special treatment.
Right.
I mean, it's not a deep secret. It probably will come out, but they asked me not to emphasize it so far. But it's one of the best auction houses in the world.
Of course. I can guess which one, but I will not say.
Both made the same offer. Well, let me not give away the secret. You can guess, but not out loud. The other thing that I'm up to is, it occurred to me that what if I gave a TED Talk on this? And the TED Talk would be, the title of it would be Human Trafficking's Evil Equation. And the evil equation is obscene profits, $150 billion a year. So obscene profits, plus no punishment. If you are a trafficker, your odds of doing jail time are way less than 1 in 100. So obscene profits, no punishment equals unimaginable misery. So I want to give a talk about the evil equation and what can be done about it. And one of the unique features of what I'm doing is I'm not really raising money for Win This Fight. The money that I raise, the people who donate these fabulous items, they get to say where it goes. So supposing you love the Child Liberation Foundation or Safe House Project or any of whatever whatever organization you really care about, you can say that your object gets to go to that particular organization.
Oh, wow.
And I look at it very, very broadly. So, for example, if some of our listeners right now, if their issue is mental health, if they have a foundation connected with mental health, they could be eligible for one of these donations. I mean, if they have on their board of directors somebody who would make a large donation of a physical object like a hotel or a yacht,
Right.
or jewelry or a painting or whatever, they can say where it goes. And I'm all for mental health being one of the recipients, because people with mental health issues are so vulnerable to traffickers.
Absolutely.
I mean, traffickers want people who are vulnerable, and they don't even care what kind of vulnerability you have. By the way, you know, one of the worst pipelines is children with LBT. Let me get it right.
LGBTQI plus.
Yeah, when I started it off wrong, I was going to get it wrong, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Okay, they are particularly vulnerable.
Yes.
And then, you know, another population that's really vulnerable: runaways from child protective services. Another one, or the foster care system. Another one, and this is just so evil. One of the ugliest pipelines into trafficking is, supposing it could be a man, but just for conversation's sake, let's say it's a girl. She's been incarcerated for 5 years. And by the way, I know of a case of what I'm describing. She's been incarcerated for 5 years. She comes out. She's having a heck of a time getting a job because, you know, she's a convicted felon. And she has a terrible time finding a place to stay. And this kindly, nice person seems to be waiting for her and says, "Oh, I've got a hot meal for you. I've got a place for you to stay. I'll help you get back together again." And she trusts him, but he's actually a trafficker, and she's going to be trafficked 10 or so times a night. And, you know, he'll threaten to kill her if she tries to escape.
Right. Or her family, or I have a number of friends who were trafficked, and I've heard sometimes they even are, you know, very attractive younger gentlemen will be kind of out there seducing, pretending to be their boyfriend, garnering their trust, and then it turns into this whole other, you know, an actual nightmare.
Yeah, how could it get any worse than that? Like a girl that, I'm going to use a fake name, but we'll call her Mindy Meadows. She met somebody, she came from a religious background. At age 14, she was allowed for the first time in her life to go to the mall by herself. Ugh. She met this, he told her he was 17, and he was just really interested in her, you know, saying how cute she was and how much he enjoyed her company. And pretty soon, you know, in the next couple of weeks, they were texting each other 20 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just deeply in love with him. I'll jump ahead in the story. He started out as the Romeo pimp. You know, we're going to have a life together, but we need to make some money. We can get, you know, a few $100s if you'll just sleep with my friend. And she's saying, you know, but I'm a religious girl. I can't do this. But she's madly in love with him. And he's sort of taken over her whole mind and her whole way of thinking. And pretty soon, Romeo pimp turns into gorilla pimp, and he threatens to kill her and her baby brother if she doesn't earn $500 a night. And pretty soon that's up to $1,000 a night.
Right.
And in the case of Mindy Meadows, she was with her pimp for 4 years. He made more than $1 million off of her.
Yeah.
Of which she didn't see a penny. And the whole time, you know, she was afraid of being beaten or starved. It was just the ultimate nightmare.
Yeah, it's always amazing to me what people can and do live through, and how they survive during that time, especially when we're talking about, you know, the Romeo pimp, as you say, that the whole organism around child trafficking is an extremely, it's built upon cult like
Yeah.
I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but that they learn how to groom. They learn what child molesters learn how to do: grooming or subversive control, all of those things that are going on to just chip away. And they also bring in Stockholm syndrome, so that the child that's being trafficked then somehow ends up with some kind of empathy or feelings of love for their trafficker. And then I've had some that have said, I wouldn't have left even if I could have gotten away, because I thought I was brainwashed into thinking I was so in love with this person that was doing this to me, that they actually had to bring in a cult expert to deprogram some of these kids to get them to actually leave.
It's just breathtaking how evil it is. But on the other hand, I've met some of the most wonderful people in the world who are attacking this problem and giving their lives to doing it. So it's, to my mind, it has the world's worst people and the world's best people.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you found it, because the amount of good that you can do there is astounding. I mean, look at what you're doing already.
Well, I sure as heck want to do more. And I mentioned that I want to do this TED Talk. And in the TED Talk, I want to talk about the example of there is a country that has learned how to prosecute traffickers, and it's Taiwan. And they've made it a national priority to decrease, I mentioned the evil equation, extreme profit or obscene profits and no punishment equals immeasurable suffering. Well, what Taiwan is doing is they're changing the equation, because, in most cases, a trafficker doesn't have even 1 in 100 chance of doing jail time. And the reason why is because they can terrify their victims, that they'll be killed or beaten or whatever.
Yes.
They can keep their victims from testifying. What Taiwan has done is it has, as far as I can tell, a whole system of safe houses that are just carefully guarded, where, and again, let's say it's a girl, although it could be a boy. The girl, she's going to be safe until she testifies against the bad guy. And she will be protected until the guy's in jail. And meanwhile, she's being taught at government expense to learn to earn a living for herself. She's getting
Right.
training and education. And it's just such a beautiful thing. I would love to encourage, or at least to let other countries be aware of, that there is an answer to the problem that the traffickers don't get prosecuted, because Taiwan does it.
Right, exactly. And that they're also getting, I'm sure, just the amount of mental health care that they need after what they've just experienced.
Oh, they have therapy, they have medical care. It's just a beautiful system. And it has made a huge dent in trafficking in Taiwan, because if you're a trafficker in Taiwan, it's just not a good career choice, because
Right.
do you want to end up in jail?
Right. And that hierarchy of when you go to jail and the other inmates know what it is that you're there for.
It's not happy time.
It's not happy time. Exactly. Exactly. Well, Mitzi, oh my gosh, I I knew that you were involved in this, but I didn't know the degree of it. And I feel lucky that I get to meet you and hear what you're doing.
Thank you.
Please tell my listeners where they can find out more about you, but also for this amazing work that you're doing.
Well, let's focus on the work. I have a website that's devoted just to anti-trafficking efforts, and it's called winthisfight.org. And I'll tell you how to remember Win This Fight. The initials are WTF. And
I saw that somewhere in your byline, and I thought that's cute.
Okay, well, it's absolutely not an accident. It's a little bit, if you want somebody to remember something, it really helps if there's a little bit of wrongness in it. And I hope that I come across as somewhat ladylike. And I think
Yes.
it's a little bit, I don't know, maybe
cheeky. It's a little cheeky.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps to remember it that somebody like me is saying WTF.
That's right. Exactly.
So winthisfight.org.
And I love it that you're like, well, we don't need to just go look at my website. Go to this one. I would do the same thing. Oh, that's so funny.
Well, if somebody wants to go to my website, it's mitziperdue.com.
I love it. Well, Mitzi, thank you so much for coming on my show and allowing us to support you in winning this fight in your WTF on our network.
There, you said it too. Gotcha.
Thank you so much. And listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode with our amazing guest, Mitzi Perdue, on Mental Health News Radio. Hi, listeners. I'll make it quick. These are some really cool places that give discounts and other cool things for listeners of Mental Health News Radio Network. If you want to get amazing help with healing from narcissistic abuse, go to healfromanarcissist.com. If you want CBD products that are the best of the best, I use them myself, go to proze.com and use the code mentalhealth20, mentalhealth20. If you want to get daily perk ups that help retrain your brain to think more positively, go to perkupdaily.com. And also, just because this one's fun, snarkycandles.com. I guarantee you'll love them. Snarky with a Y, SNARKY candles.com. And don't forget, if you want to hear all the shows on the network about first responders, you can go to firstrespondermentalhealthnetwork.com, and all of our shows that focus on narcissistic abuse, narcissisticabusehealingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, and back to the show.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
One thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristen Sananta Walker, and thank you for listening.
And I can ride the low, low, lows with me. I can ride the low, low, lows with me. Till my vision clears up perfectly. I can ride the low, low, lows with me.
Good boy.